The sound came just before sunrise, a faint, rhythmic scratching on the wooden porch that pulled Dr. Emily Carter from a restless sleep. For a moment she thought it was the wind, or maybe one of the old boards complaining in the cool morning air. But then it came again, soft but deliberate, like something alive was asking to be let in. Emily sat up slowly, her joints protesting, as they always did now. Retirement, everyone had told her, would be peaceful. A time for gardening, reading, maybe a little travel. But no one warned her about the silence, the kind that crept into the walls and filled the long hours after the work stopped. She had spent 30 years as a wildlife veterinarian, crossing continents to rescue animals in crisis. Yet nothing had prepared her for the quiet ache of being unnecessary. She slipped on her robe, the old flannel one she used during fieldwork in Botswana, and stepped barefoot onto the cold tile. The house was small, one story, white paint faded by the African sun, sitting at the far edge of a wildlife corridor outside Kruger National Park. She had chosen it because she thought it would keep her close to what she loved most, the wild. But lately, even the sounds of the bush felt distant, like memories fading at the edges. The scratching came again. Emily froze. Through the thin curtain, she could make out a small shape crouched near the door. She hesitated only a second before pulling the curtain aside. What she saw made her heart skip. A cub, small, trembling, golden fur clinging in wet clumps, sat upright, one paw pressed gently against the glass. Its eyes, wide and amber, met hers with a strange mix of fear and determination. "Oh my God," Emily whispered. She recognized the species immediately, or thought she did. The rosettes on her fur were faint, like those of a very young leopard, but the head seemed broader, the muzzle heavier. It looked exhausted, ribs faintly visible beneath the fur. She'd seen hundreds of cubs in her career, and this one looked barely old enough to survive on its own. Every instinct screamed at her to call the park rangers, to let professionals handle it. "You don't feed wild predators, Emily. You don't touch them. You let nature take its course." That had been her rule for decades. But as the cub lifted its paw again, touching the glass, as if knocking, something inside her broke. She opened the door. The air was sharp and cool, carrying the scent of dust and acacia. The cub didn't move. It simply blinked up at her, swaying slightly, and then gave a small, rasping chirp, a sound so fragile it might have been the last of its strength. "Oh, it's okay," she said softly, her voice trembling more than she expected. "You're safe now." Emily backed into the kitchen, careful not to startle it. She filled a bowl with water, another with small strips of leftover chicken. When she stepped back outside, the cub was still there, staring at her with that same strange intensity. She set the bowls down and retreated to the doorway. For a long moment nothing happened. Then cautiously, the cub moved forward, sniffing the air. It drank first, greedy, desperate gulps that spoke of days without water. Then it began to eat, small pieces at a time, as if unsure this kindness was real. Emily watched, the sunrise bleeding gold over the horizon. It was one of those African mornings where the world seemed to hold its breath, a stillness so deep you could hear your own heartbeat. She hadn't realized she was crying until she felt the tears cool on her cheeks. When the cub finished, it sat back, licked its paws, and looked straight at her. And in that quiet, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The kind that fills the empty spaces you didn't know were breaking. She knelt down slowly, careful not to move too close. "Where's your mother?" she whispered. She already knew the answer. A cub this young, alone, could only mean tragedy. Poachers, maybe, or predators, or one of 1,000 dangers that claimed lives in the bush every day. The cub made that sound again, half purr, half cry, and Emily felt her resolve crumble. She carried an old wool blanket from inside, laying it a few feet from the door. The cub hesitated, then limped closer and collapsed onto it. curling into a tight ball. Within minutes, it was asleep. Emily sat nearby in her chair, watching it breathe. Its sides rose and fell in shallow rhythms, the way tiny things do when life is trying hard to stay inside them. She should call someone, she told herself. The Kruger Rescue Unit, the Wildlife Service, anyone. She should follow protocol. But instead, she sat there until the sun was high, listening to the soft, uneven breathing of the small creature that had chosen her doorstep. Later that morning, she finally made the call. "Ranger Unit," came the voice on the other end. "This is Dr. Emily Carter. I have an orphaned leopard cub at my house. It's weak, malnourished, and possibly dehydrated. You'll want to send someone soon." "Understood, doctor. We'll dispatch a vehicle, but it might take some time. We're responding to a poaching incident on the North Ridge." "Of course," Emily said. "I'll keep it stable until you arrive." After she hung up, she looked out the window again. The cub stirred slightly, stretching one oversized paw. For the first time, she noticed the faint beginnings of a mane, soft golden fuzz around the neck that caught the morning light. Her breath caught. That's not a leopard," she murmured. The realization came with a strange mix of awe and dread. A lion cub, a young male, alone, desperate, and somehow alive. Emily leaned back in her chair, staring at the sleeping bundle of fur. She'd delivered elephants, stitched up cheetahs, bottle-fed rhinos, but she'd never been a mother. She'd never been needed in quite this way. Maybe this was what the universe did when you stopped believing you had a purpose. Maybe it sent a soft knock at your door at dawn. She smiled faintly. "All right, little one," she whispered. "We'll figure this out together." The cub stirred again, letting out a sound halfway between a sigh and a purr. Emily felt warmth bloom in her chest. Outside, the savannah stretched endlessly, golden and silent. Inside, an aging woman and a lion cub began a story that would change them both. And somewhere between those two worlds, the wild and the human, something fragile and extraordinary had just begun. If you believe, like Emily, that compassion can bridge the gap between humans and the wild, stay with us, subscribe, and be part of this journey, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change two lives forever. By the time the sun climbed high enough to burn through the early mist, the cub had begun to stir again. Emily watched from the kitchen doorway, her hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold. Outside, the creature blinked at the morning light, uncertain, its fur still matted with dew. The small bowl she'd left beside him was empty, licked clean, and she felt a strange satisfaction knowing he'd had enough strength to eat. The air carried the dry scent of acacia and dust, familiar, grounding, but everything else felt foreign. Her little porch, her morning routine, even the house itself, all of it seemed to have shifted slightly, like the world had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. Emily had lived alone for nearly 15 years, and not once had she woken with her heart racing for something other than fear. When she stepped outside, the cub flinched but didn't move away. Up close, she could see the faint patterns of spots scattered across its coat, but they weren't quite right. They faded too soon, almost like shadows under the fur. Its paws, God, the paws were huge. She crouched down, studying it with a practiced eye, her mind sifting through decades of field notes. Leopard cubs had lighter limbs, leaner torsos. This one's chest was broader, shoulders already muscled beneath the thin skin. "You're not a leopard," she whispered, not yet realizing how right she was. The cub yawned, revealing sharp white teeth and a pink tongue. Then, as if deciding she was no threat, it padded over to her boots and sat. The warmth of its small body radiated through the cold air. She felt her throat tighten. "You've chosen the wrong woman, little one. I can't save everything." But even as she said it, Emily was already moving,
checking the animal's eyes, gums, hydration. Her hands remembered the motions like a song. She retrieved her old first aid kit from the kitchen shelf. Gauze, iodine, an empty syringe she used for hydration drips. She hesitated for only a second before filling a small bowl with diluted milk substitute, something she still kept on hand for the occasional orphaned antelope or small cat she'd helped years ago. When she returned, the cub sniffed the bowl, then began to lap eagerly, tail twitching. She smiled despite herself. That's right. Drink. There's more where that came from. She stayed beside him, jotting notes into a faded field journal. Her handwriting was slower now, shakier, but precise. Approximate 3 months old. Male. Underweight. Dehydrated. Paws unusually large. No maternal scent detected. A car engine hummed in the distance, an old diesel truck making its way up the dirt road. The Ranger. Emily's chest tightened. Part of her wanted them to arrive quickly and take the burden away. The other, a quieter, older voice, hoped they'd be delayed a little longer. When Ranger Daniel Hayes stepped out of the vehicle, his khaki uniform was already dusted with red earth. He tipped his hat, smiling politely. "Morning, Doc. You keeping busy in retirement?" Emily motioned toward the porch. "You could say that." Daniel's smile faded as soon as he saw the cub. He crouched down, careful but curious. "You said leopard in your call. That's not what I expected." "Neither did I," she said. Daniel inspected the cub the way men inspect explosives. He noticed the paws, too. "You realize this is going to be a problem, right? If it's what I think it is, we can't keep it here." "It's an orphan," she replied, voice firm. "You can't just dump it in the wild." "Protocol says we transfer it to the rehabilitation center. They'll sort out species and placement." "I know what protocol says." Her tone softened. "But look at him, Daniel. He's barely alive. If you move him now, he'll never make it through the night." The ranger sighed, standing. He respected Emily. Everyone did. She had once saved an entire litter of wild dogs during a drought. Her reputation still carried weight. "All right," he said finally. "You stabilize him. I'll report to headquarters. Tell them we'll wait 24 hours before transport." Emily nodded, relief mixing with guilt. She didn't look at him as he left. That night, as the sun dipped low, she lit a single lamp beside the porch. The cub slept in the blanket, belly full, head resting on his paws. Every few minutes his body twitched as if chasing something in his dreams. Emily leaned back in her chair, watching. She remembered a line from an old wildlife study. "Predators are born with hunger, but they must be taught mercy." She wondered if she had either left in her. She couldn't help noticing the irony. In her younger days, she'd written entire articles about ethical wildlife care, about letting nature take its course. But sitting there in the dim light, her hands smelling faintly of antiseptic and dust, all those lines blurred. There was no course left for nature to take. There was just a living creature who had asked for help, and a woman too lonely to say no. When she stepped inside to wash up, the house felt alive again. She turned on the radio, something she hadn't done in months. News murmured from faraway cities, mortgage rates, solar energy updates, even an ad for insurance quotes promising peace of mind no matter where life takes you. Emily smiled faintly. Peace of mind. That's what she'd been chasing since the day she hung up her field boots. Outside, the cub stirred, raising its head at the sound of her voice when she returned. She crouched down again, brushing her fingers gently along the edge of its ear. Its fur was softer than she expected, thick despite the grime. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" she said softly. "Well, so have I." The cub looked up at her, eyes steady, and for a second she felt something pass between them, a small, silent agreement neither of them could break. Before heading to bed, Emily placed an old baby monitor by the door, its receiver beside her pillow. If he moved, she'd hear it. She told herself it was just practical caution, but deep down she knew she was afraid of waking up and finding him gone. At 3 a.m. she did wake, heart pounding at the sound of faint scratching. She hurried to the door. The cub hadn't run away. It was pawing gently at the glass again, like it wanted to make sure she was still there. Emily opened the door and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." The cub blinked, yawned, and curled back onto the blanket. She stood there for a long moment, her breath misting in the cold air, before closing the door again. That night, sleep finally came. Not the shallow kind filled with regret, but real, dreamless rest. By morning, Emily knew one thing for sure. She wasn't just keeping the cub alive, she was keeping herself alive too. By the third morning, the cub was strong enough to move around the porch, nosing at flower pots and sniffing the legs of the rocking chair. Emily watched him through the kitchen window, her coffee growing cold again. There was something oddly reassuring about seeing life stir in her quiet world, something that made the loneliness feel softer, like it had edges she could touch instead of walls she couldn't climb. When Daniel Hayes' truck rolled up the dirt road, dust trailing behind it, Emily already knew the conversation would not be pleasant. He was punctual, the kind of man who lived by schedules and rules. A good ranger, but one who trusted regulations more than instincts. He stepped out, adjusting his hat, and looked at the cub now sitting calmly by the door. "Well," he said, "he looks better than I expected." Emily smiled faintly. "He's eating, drinking, sleeping. That's what living things are supposed to do, isn't it?" Daniel crouched beside the animal, studying him carefully. "Those paws," he muttered, "and the jawline. You're sure you still want to call this a leopard?" "I'm not sure of anything anymore," Emily said quietly. He glanced up, concern softening the hard line of his mouth. "Emily, you know how this goes. Once we identify him, he'll need to be transferred. You can't keep a big cat here, not one that could weigh over 400 pounds someday." Her heart stung at his tone, firm, logical, necessary. "He's just a baby," she said. "For now, but wild things grow fast. You feed him, you let him near you, he'll start seeing this place as his den. And that means you, doctor, become part of his territory. You don't want that." She turned away, her eyes fixed on the distant savannah. The horizon shimmered in heat waves. "He found me, Daniel. What was I supposed to do, shut the door?" He sighed. "You did the right thing calling me, but don't make the mistake of thinking this bond is something permanent. He's an apex predator. Instinct wins every time." The cub, oblivious to the tension, wandered toward Daniel and rubbed against his boot. The ranger froze. Emily smiled despite herself. "Looks like instinct has other plans." Daniel exhaled. "All right, you get 48 more hours. I'll clear it with headquarters. But after that, we transfer him. No arguments." Emily nodded, though her stomach tightened with dread. When Daniel left, she sat beside the cub and whispered, 2 days, that's all we get." He looked up at her with sleepy eyes, then collapsed into her lap as if he'd already made peace with the world. She ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the thrum of life beneath. That afternoon, clouds rolled in from the west, and a low rumble of thunder vibrated through the valley. Emily secured the windows, but the cub refused to stay inside. He sat at the doorway, watching the rain with quiet fascination. Every so often, lightning flashed across his reflection in the glass, 2 golden eyes glowing in the dark. She sat nearby, reading an old wildlife journal, though her mind wasn't on the words. The sound of rain had always comforted her, but tonight it felt different. It reminded her of field nights in Kenya, tending to injured lions under tarp shelters, the smell of blood and disinfectant mingling with wet earth. Back then, every storm was a test of endurance. Now, it was something else entirely, a reminder that she was still capable of caring. At one point, she reached for her phone. The home page displayed an article headline: "Life Insurance and Retirement Planning for Seniors. Find Peace of Mind Today." She smiled faintly at the irony. Peace of mind was exactly what she was buying in that moment, not through policies or plans, but by protecting this living, breathing creature. When the rain eased, she stepped outside. The cub was curled up under the porch bench, dry and warm. He blinked up at her, tail flicking once, twice. "Come on, little one," she said. "Let's get you ready." She spent the next few hours preparing for the ranger's return, sterilizing syringes, labeling sample tubes, updating her notes. Yet every task felt heavier than it should. It wasn't just about documentation anymore. It was about preservation, memory. The cub had become part of her story, and the thought of losing him twisted something deep inside. That night, she dreamed of her younger self, knee-deep in the Okavango marshes, guiding tranquilized cheetahs to safety. She remembered the way their eyes would flicker open as the sedatives faded, always cautious, always wild. But this time in her dream, it wasn't a cheetah or a leopard. It was the same cub from her porch, older now, mane brushing against the light. And when it looked at her, it didn't see a rescuer. It saw home. The next morning, Daniel returned, clipboard in hand. "Headquarters approved the transfer. We've got a transport cage coming by noon." Emily nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "He's not ready." "He'll be fine. The rehab center has everything: nutrition, medical care, even enrichment. He doesn't need a cage. He needs connection. Connection won't keep you safe when he hits maturity." The cub, sensing her distress, pressed against her leg. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "He trusts me," she whispered. Daniel's expression softened, but his voice remained steady. "That's exactly why this is dangerous." They stood in silence for a long moment, the savanna stretching endlessly around them. A lone bird called from the distance, its echo lingering between the two humans and the animal that bridged their worlds. When the truck finally arrived, Emily helped Daniel lift the cub into the crate. The animal didn't struggle. It only looked at her through the bars, confused but calm. "I'll see you soon," she whispered. Daniel gave her a small nod as they loaded the cage into the truck. "You did the right thing, Emily." But as the vehicle rumbled away down the dirt road, leaving a trail of dust and silence behind it, Emily wasn't so sure. That night she couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet again, every creak of the wooden floor a reminder of absence. She walked to the porch, gazing into the darkness, the air heavy with damp earth and the faint scent of rain. Somewhere out there, a lion cub was alone again. And then, faintly, from far beyond the hills, came a sound she knew too well. The soft, desperate call of a young predator searching for what it had lost. Emily pressed her hand to her chest, eyes wet. "She's coming back," she whispered. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Emily felt something stir inside her, a quiet conviction, steady and unstoppable. The wild had a way of returning what it claimed. Sometimes love was just that, the echo of a knock you couldn't ignore.
It had been exactly 9 days since the cub was taken away. 9 long, silent dawns that felt more like years than mornings. Emily had tried to fill the hours, reading old field journals, tending to her small garden, even taking on a bit of freelance consulting work for a wildlife foundation she once helped establish. But none of it dulled the ache that settled behind her ribs every time the wind brushed against the porch and the house creaked as if remembering him too. She told herself that what she'd done was right, that the rehabilitation center would provide everything he needed, proper food, controlled environment, medical care, socialization. She repeated it like a prayer, hoping it would sound truer with time. But when she turned on the radio or browsed the internet, every comforting word felt hollow. Even a simple online ad about home insurance and peace of mind made her grimace. Peace of mind. Whoever wrote those lines had clearly never watched something wild being taken away. The nights were the hardest. Sometimes she swore she could still hear him breathing outside, curled up under the porch bench. Once, in her half-sleep, she even thought she heard that familiar scratching at the door. But when she opened it, the only thing waiting was the wind. Then, on the 10th morning, the knock came again. At first, she ignored it, convinced it was her imagination replaying old sounds. But it came again, 3 soft taps, steady and real. Her heart leaped to her throat. She set her mug down with trembling hands and moved toward the door. The moment she pulled the curtain aside, her knees nearly gave out. There he was, mud-caked, thinner, his fur matted and tangled with burrs, but unmistakably him. The lion cub, not as small as before, but not yet grown. His eyes, once amber and uncertain, were now deeper, wilder, but they still carried that same strange recognition when they met hers. "Oh, God, how did you—" He took one shaky step forward and pressed his paw against the glass. The same gesture as before, the same knock that had started everything. Emily didn't think. She opened the door. He stumbled toward her, weak but determined, and collapsed against her boots. She dropped to her knees, cradling his head, tears spilling freely. "You came back. You found me." For a long while, she just held him, feeling his heartbeat against her palms. He was too thin, his ribs visible, but alive. That alone was a miracle. She moved quickly. Warm water, antiseptic, a soft towel. The motions came like instinct. Her old training took over. She examined him carefully, noting small scars near the hind leg, bite marks, likely from another young predator. Whatever safe rehabilitation the center had promised clearly hadn't lasted long. When she called the center to ask about him, the line rang endlessly. Finally, a young man answered. "Kruger Wildlife Rehabilitation. How can I help you?" "This is Dr. Emily Carter. I'm calling about the lion cub that was transferred here last week, male, roughly 4 months old." There was a pause. Papers shuffled. Then the man's tone changed. "Dr. Carter, I'm so sorry. We were going to contact you. The cub escaped 2 days ago during a storm. He broke through a weak section of the holding fence. We sent out a search team, but—" She closed her eyes. "He came home," she said softly. "Home?" "Yes," she whispered. "To me." The man stammered, unsure how to respond. "That's remarkable, but you understand, ma'am, we'll need to send a unit." "No," Emily interrupted. "Not yet. He's injured, weak. I'll stabilize him first, then we'll talk about next steps." She hung up before he could argue. The cub, her cub, was asleep by the time she returned. His breathing was steady now, his body curled in the same familiar way. She sat beside him on the floor, listening to the soft rhythm. That afternoon, Daniel showed up, the dust from his truck swirling through the sunlight. She knew he'd been called. His expression was unreadable when he stepped onto the porch. "You're not going to believe this," she said before he could speak. "He found his way back." "I believe it," Daniel said quietly. "Animals have better instincts than we do." He crouched beside the cub, studying the wounds. "He's lucky he made it this far. He shouldn't be alive." "He's stronger than he looks," Emily said, unable to keep the pride in her voice. Daniel met her gaze. "You can't keep him, Emily." "I know what you're going to say, but—" He held up a hand. "Just listen. I checked with the center. They're a mess. That storm destroyed 2 enclosures. 3 animals went missing. They're understaffed, underfunded, and you know the bureaucracy. They'll try to move him again as soon as they can. Then I'll keep him here until they're ready." Daniel exhaled, rubbing his jaw. You realize that's illegal without authorization. Then make it legal, she shot back. Write whatever report you have to. There was silence between them, the kind that comes when two people both know the rules but wish they didn't. Finally, Daniel spoke. I'll pretend I didn't see him, for now. But you need to understand something, Emily. If you keep feeding him, if he bonds with you again, there won't be any going back. He'll see you as part of his pride. And when he grows up, I'll handle it, she said firmly. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You were always stubborn. When he left, Emily sat beside the cub again. He stirred, blinking slowly, and let out a low rumble. Not quite a growl, but something close. It wasn't a sound of threat, though. It was recognition. Yeah, she murmured. You and me both. Days passed, and the cub regained his strength. He began exploring the edges of her property again, poking his nose into flower beds, chasing shadows, startling birds from the trees. His movements were more confident now, muscles developing beneath his coat. Emily found herself adjusting her routines around him almost unconsciously. She reinforced the fence, kept her freezer stocked with meat, and even installed outdoor cameras for safety, she told herself, though deep down she just wanted to watch him when she couldn't sleep. At night, when the stars shimmered like shards of glass across the black sky, she sometimes sat on the porch, and he would sit beside her, quiet and alert. Their silhouettes, one woman, one lion, seemed carved from the same piece of solitude. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was a life that made sense again. Then one evening, as she watched him chase fireflies across the field, something inside her whispered that peace never lasts long in the wild. She didn't know how right she was, because the next dawn, when she stepped outside to call for him, the cub was gone.
When the morning light crept through her window, Emily Carter knew something was wrong. It wasn't the silence. Her home had long been filled with that, but the type of silence, the kind that felt hollow, off balance. She opened the back door and called softly into the cool dawn air. Hey boy, breakfast? Her voice carried across the open field, but nothing stirred. No rustle in the grass, no answering sound. She waited, listening, and then tried again, louder this time. Come on, you little troublemaker. Don't do this to me. Still nothing. She slipped on her boots, her heartbeat already quickening, and started toward the tree line. The ground was damp with morning dew, soft enough to hold tracks. She spotted his paw prints easily, larger now, deeper. They moved in uneven paths, weaving between the bushes, as if he'd been pacing or chasing something. The tracks stopped near the small stream that cut through her property. She crouched down, fingers brushing the mud. There were two sets of prints now. The second set, smaller, lighter, belonged to a wild jackal, a predator's curiosity meeting another's. Her chest tightened. The cub was still too young to fend off anything aggressive. Please be safe, she whispered, eyes scanning the horizon. Emily headed toward her old Land Rover, tossing a worn backpack into the passenger seat. She packed the essentials: water, first aid kit, tranquilizer darts, standard issue from her wildlife days, and her binoculars. She hesitated, then grabbed the portable radio and an emergency satellite phone. The vehicle roared to life, engine echoing through the open land. As she drove, she checked her side mirror and caught sight of herself, gray hair pulled back, sun lines deepened, eyes tired but fierce. She hadn't looked this alive in years. Her mind buzzed with possibilities. Maybe he'd chased prey too far. Maybe he'd followed an instinct stronger than memory. But a darker thought pressed in. Maybe someone had seen him. A lion near a residential area would attract attention and panic. She stopped near the edge of the reserve boundary, the place where managed wilderness met the untamed. She stepped out, scanning the ground again. More tracks. His. fresh. As she followed the trail deeper into the bush, the heat began to rise. Flies circled lazily in the air. The sound of insects grew louder, blending with the thud of her heartbeat. She caught glimpses of broken branches, disturbed soil, a sign of recent movement. Then she saw it. A tuft of golden fur snagged on a thorn bush. Her breath caught. She knelt, touching it gently, then glanced around. The tracks were clearer now. He'd been running, and something had been chasing him. Emily's hands trembled as she radioed for Daniel. "It's me. I found his trail heading southeast past the creek. It looks like he was in trouble." Daniel's voice crackled through the static. "I'll meet you there in 15 minutes. Stay put." But she didn't stay put. She kept walking, slower now, her eyes scanning every shadow. The bush opened into a clearing, dotted with termite mounds and dry grass. And there, by the base of a fallen tree, she found him. The cub lay on his side, breathing shallowly, his fur streaked with blood from a gash on his shoulder. Nearby, the carcass of a jackal told the rest of the story. He had fought and won, but the victory had cost him. Emily dropped to her knees beside him. "Hey," she whispered, voice breaking. "It's okay. I've got you." She worked quickly, cleaning the wound with antiseptic, checking for infection. He flinched once, but didn't resist. When she met his gaze, she saw no fear, only exhaustion and trust. Daniel's truck arrived not long after. He jumped out, jaw tight as he took in the scene. "Damn it, Emily, you should have waited." "I couldn't. He needed me." He knelt beside her, examining the cub. "He's tougher than he looks. He's learning, maybe, from me?" Daniel gave her a look that was half admiration, half exasperation. "You realize this complicates things, right? If word gets out there's a lion this close to human property, then no one can find out," she said firmly. He sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're asking me to bury this, Emily. That's not how it works." "I'm asking you to trust me." Daniel hesitated. "Trust got people killed in my line of work." "Then trust him," she said, nodding toward the cub. "He found his way back once. He's not a monster, Daniel. He's something else." The ranger studied her face, then looked at the cub again. "You know what people say about wild animals that get too comfortable with humans?" "I do. They say it never ends well. But maybe this time it can." He didn't answer. Instead, he helped her lift the cub into the back of the Land Rover. Back at her house, Emily cleaned the wound more thoroughly, stitched what needed stitching, and wrapped it with gauze. The cub lay still, his breathing evening out. She felt his pulse steady under her fingers, and let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "You're not allowed to scare me like that again," she said softly. As night fell, Daniel lingered on the porch. "I'll file a report, but I'll keep it vague. Just be careful. You're playing with something you can't control." She nodded. "I know." When he left, she sat beside the cub again. He opened his eyes briefly, looking up at her, and she swore there was understanding there. Not the kind you could explain to anyone, but the kind you felt. Later, as she typed up her notes on an old laptop, partly out of habit, partly to distract herself, an ad popped up in the corner of the screen. Pet insurance for unexpected moments, because they're family too. She smiled faintly. "If only you knew," she muttered. Outside, the night deepened. Crickets sang. The cub stirred in his sleep,
twitching as if dreaming of open plains and star-choked skies. Emily leaned back in her chair, the exhaustion finally settling in, and watched him from across the room. The thought struck her suddenly and without warning, one she'd been avoiding since the beginning. If he was growing this fast, what would happen when instinct finally outweighed affection? Would he still know her? Would he still choose her? She looked toward the window, where the moonlight spilled across the floor like a silent promise. Whatever came next, she decided, she wouldn't let fear dictate the ending. Not this time. And as the wind swept gently across the open land, carrying the distant roar of something far older than them both, Emily whispered, "You're not alone anymore. Neither of us are."
The cub healed faster than Emily expected. Within 2 weeks, the wound on his shoulder had closed to a faint scar beneath the tawny fur. His appetite returned with ferocity. He devoured meals twice a day, moving with an energy that filled the house and yard. The quiet mornings that once felt empty now hummed with life again. She'd wake to the sound of his padded steps circling the porch, his low grumbles, the occasional crash of a flower pot. But with that return to strength came something new, something raw. It began one evening as the sun dipped below the savanna horizon, staining the sky a deep crimson. Emily was sitting on the porch, reading a newspaper article about rising home insurance rates and the growing costs of living in remote areas. It was the kind of practical thing she used to care about. Now, it felt like a whisper from another life. She folded the paper and looked out toward the field, where the cub prowled among the tall grass. He wasn't the same little creature who once fit in a blanket. His body had changed, shoulders broader, neck stronger, movements slower but more deliberate. There was a power building under his skin, waiting to be tested. When a distant thunderclap echoed across the valley, he froze, muscles tightening. Then, from deep within his chest, a low rumble began, a sound so primal that it made the hairs on Emily's arms rise. It grew, rolling out of him like the first breath of something ancient and inevitable. A roar. Not long, not loud, but enough to silence everything else. Emily stared, her heart swelling with pride and fear at once. "Well," she whispered, "there it is." The cub turned, eyes meeting hers, as if he too was startled by what he'd just done. He padded toward her, head low, brushing against her leg. She ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the strength beneath. "You're growing up," she said softly. "I just hope the world's ready for you." Over the next few days, he grew bolder. He chased the occasional rabbit, stalked shadows, and began marking the edges of her property. His instincts were blooming as fiercely as the acacia flowers that lined the fence. And with every new behavior, Emily saw less of the helpless cub and more of what he was meant to be. One morning, Daniel stopped by again. His eyes widened when he saw the lion, no longer a cub, stretching lazily in the yard. "Jesus, Emily, he's twice the size he was last month." Emily smiled faintly. "He's thriving." "He's dangerous," Daniel countered. "You can't keep him contained forever. It's not just about you. What happens if someone wanders too close? If he gets startled? He's not going to hurt anyone." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "You don't know that. He's a predator. Instinct doesn't care about your intentions." "I know what instinct looks like, Daniel. I've studied it my whole life, and this isn't it. He's aware of himself, of me." He frowned, staring out at the lion. "You talk like he's a person." "No," she said softly. "I talk like he's alive. That's more than most people can say these days." He sighed. "You can't reason your way through this. Eventually, nature wins." "Maybe,
but maybe we underestimate nature's capacity for grace. Daniel shook his head but didn't argue further. Before leaving, he said quietly, "When the time comes, you'll have to let him go, for both your sakes." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, the air cool and heavy with the scent of rain. The lion, no longer just a cub, lay stretched out under the porch light. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. She watched him, her heart caught between awe and sorrow. In the distance, thunder rumbled again, and then it happened. The roar returned, louder this time, longer, echoing across the valley like a challenge to the storm itself. The sound made her shiver, not from fear, but from the realization that she was witnessing something sacred. He wasn't just finding his voice, he was finding his place in the world. The next morning, her phone buzzed. It was an email from a journalist she used to work with at a wildlife publication. Subject: rare animal sightings near private properties. "Hi, Dr. Carter. Reports are coming in about a young lion seen near private properties. Locals are alarmed. Any chance it's one of your old rehabilitation projects? Would love a quote for our article." Emily's stomach dropped. If word got out, everything would unravel. The authorities would come, they'd tranquilize him, tag him, and haul him off to some remote reserve. She knew the pattern all too well. She deleted the email. That afternoon, Daniel returned with bad news. Headquarters has picked up chatter about a lion sighting. You need to prepare yourself. They might come knocking. Emily's pulse quickened. You didn't tell them it was me. Of course not, but you're on borrowed time. She looked past him, where the lion was lounging in the tall grass, tail flicking lazily. He came back to me once. I won't abandon him now. Daniel sighed heavily. Emily, you can't protect him forever. And if they come and find him here, you could lose your license, your property, everything. Her voice softened, but her conviction didn't waver. Then let them take it. The only thing I won't lose again is him. That evening, a storm rolled in from the east. The wind howled through the trees, and lightning illuminated the hills. The lion paced restlessly under the porch, his instincts on edge. Emily sat nearby, her flashlight flickering. When the thunder cracked overhead, he lifted his head and roared again, long, defiant, echoing through the storm like a challenge to the storm itself. The sound made her shiver, not from fear, but from the realization that she was witnessing something sacred. He wasn't just finding his voice, he was finding his place in the world. The grain eased into silence. In that stillness, she heard his low breathing, steady and unbroken. And she knew this was just the beginning, because when a lion finds his roar, the world listens.
The news spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. It began as murmurs, reports of a large cat wandering near the outskirts of town, sightings of a lion with eyes like fire along the dirt roads at dusk. Then came the rumors, livestock disappearing, strange tracks near fences, the soft echo of a roar carried by the wind at night. By the time Emily drove into the small village for supplies, the story had already turned into something bigger than truth. A few men outside the general store were gathered, voices low and tense. She recognized one of them, Henry Watkins, the kind of man who always needed something to fear. "I'm telling you," Henry said, slapping his palm against the hood of his truck. "I saw it with my own eyes. Thing was massive. Could have swallowed a dog whole. And it wasn't no stray. Someone's keeping it, feeding it." The others nodded, muttering under their breath. Emily forced a smile as she approached the store, the heat of the morning pressing down like a warning. She kept her head low, her hat tilted just enough to shade her eyes. Inside, she moved through the aisles quickly. Canned meat, cleaning supplies, antiseptic, extra batteries. She tried to appear calm, but her pulse raced.
The clerk, a young woman named Lila, asked her, "You heard about that lion?" Emily froze. "Lion? They're saying it's been seen near your property." Emily laughed softly, though it sounded unnatural even to her own ears. "You know how stories grow legs in this town. Probably just a big cat wandering too far." Lila leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They've already called wildlife control. There's talk of a patrol coming out from the reserve this week." Emily's stomach tightened. She paid quickly, forcing a thank you before stepping back into the sunlight. Her hands shook as she loaded the groceries into the car. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every curve in the road looked unfamiliar, every shadow on the horizon suspicious. She turned off the radio when an ad for home security systems began playing, a smooth voice promising safety for what matters most. Emily nearly laughed at the cruel timing. When she reached her property, she spotted the lion immediately. He was lounging in the grass near the fence, eyes half closed, tail flicking lazily, completely unbothered. The sight should have calmed her. It didn't. "Hey," she called softly. He raised his head, ears twitching, and gave a low grunt of recognition. She knelt beside him, running a hand through his mane. It had grown fuller now, darker at the tips, shimmering gold in the sunlight. "You're beautiful," she whispered, "but you're making enemies out there." He blinked, as if he understood. That night, Daniel arrived unannounced. The look on his face told her everything before he even spoke. "They know, Emily. Headquarters got word. They're sending a team." She turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. "When?" "Tomorrow. Early morning." Emily's throat dried. "You have to stall them." "I've done all I can," he said, "but they're coming whether I'm on duty or not. You need to decide what you're going to do." "What do you think I'm going to do?" she asked quietly. "Emily," his voice softened, "he's not a pet, he's a predator. You can't keep him here anymore." She faced him then, her eyes fierce. "He's not just a predator, he's my responsibility." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "You can't save everything." She didn't answer. That night, sleep refused to come. She sat on the porch with the lion lying beside her, his head resting near her feet. The moon hung low and full, painting the world in silver. Crickets sang softly in the dark. She thought about everything that had led her here, her years of work, her retirement, the loneliness that had followed. This animal had filled that silence, not by fixing it, but by making it mean something. When the lion lifted his head suddenly, ears pricked, Emily followed his gaze. Out beyond the fence, the shadows shifted. For a moment she thought it was the wind again, but then she saw headlights cresting the hill in the distance. Her pulse jumped. "No," she whispered, "not yet." She stood, moving quickly into the house. Her mind raced. She had a few hours at most before dawn. If they came for him, they'd sedate him, crate him, and haul him away. And she knew what that meant. Captivity, exhibits, a slow death of the spirit. She looked at him, still standing on the porch now, eyes glowing in the moonlight. "We're running out of time," she said. He made a low, questioning sound. Emily crossed to the storage room and dug through old equipment until she found what she was looking for: a tracking collar, a tranquilizer kit, and a weathered leather harness she'd used years ago for relocating rescued cheetahs. The plan formed in her mind, reckless and desperate. She would take him deep into the reserve, far beyond where rangers usually patrol, somewhere he could live free, away from villages and fences. She'd done it before, dozens of times with other animals, but never with one that looked at her the way he did. She spent the rest of the night preparing, fueling the Land Rover, packing supplies, loading meat into coolers. Her movements were automatic, but her thoughts were chaos. When the first light of dawn broke, she stepped outside and looked at him. He was ready, somehow sensing her intent. "Come on," she said softly. "We're going home." He followed her to the truck without hesitation. As they drove towards the open plains, Emily glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He sat calmly in the back, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You'll be safe out there," she murmured. "I'll make sure of it." But deep down, she knew she was lying, to him and to herself, because letting him go would break something she wasn't sure she could ever repair. The road ahead stretched endlessly, dust rising behind them like smoke. And although Emily didn't know what waited beyond the hills, she knew one thing for certain. The world might never understand what they were to each other, but she would rather risk everything than watch him disappear again. And so, with the hum of the engine and the soft breath of the lion behind her, Emily drove towards the edge of the wilderness, towards a decision that would change both their lives forever.
The sky was a pale wash of gray when Emily's Land Rover rumbled off the last paved road and onto the red dirt path leading toward the heart of the reserve. Morning mist curled low over the grasslands, and the air carried that clean, electric scent of rain that hadn't fallen yet. The lion sat quietly in the back, his golden eyes reflecting the soft light of dawn. It had been years since she'd taken this route, back when she still worked as a wildlife biologist, long before her world had narrowed to the walls of her lonely farmhouse. Now the road looked the same, but felt different. Every mile forward was a step away from the life she'd built and the only home she had left. She kept her hands steady on the wheel, even though her heart wasn't steady at all. She told herself this was what freedom looked like, for both of them. A sign loomed ahead: Private Conservation Zone, authorized access only. She slowed the truck, exhaled, and punched the access code Daniel had once given her. The gate creaked open like an old secret being told. As they drove deeper, the land began to change. The trees grew taller, the grass thicker, the sound of human life fading until there was only the rhythm of nature. The distant calls of birds, the whisper of wind over acacia leaves, and the low growl of the engine beneath her feet. She glanced into the rearview mirror again. The lion was standing now, watching the landscape roll by, muscles tense, nostrils flaring as he caught the sense of the wild. His instincts recognized this place even if he'd never been here before. "Yeah," she said softly. "You know it, don't you? This is where you belong." For a moment, she thought about turning back, about keeping him safe, hidden, even if it meant imprisonment. But then he let out a low, contented rumble, and the doubt dissolved. He deserved more than walls and fences. They stopped at a small clearing by a dry riverbed where the tall grass swayed like golden waves. Emily shut off the engine. Silence fell heavy, absolute. The lion stepped down from the truck, moving slowly at first, then more confidently. His paws pressed into the earth like he was claiming it. Emily watched him stretch, shake his mane, and then lift his head to the wind. It was like watching something ancient come alive. For a while, she didn't move. She just stood there, taking in the sight, the lion silhouetted against the rising sun, a living embodiment of power and grace. Her chest ached with pride and grief all at once. Finally, she spoke. "Go on," she whispered. "This is your world now." He turned to her, eyes meeting hers. In them, she saw a reflection of every moment they'd shared, the mornings, the fear, the laughter she hadn't realized she'd still had in her, and something else too, understanding. But he didn't leave. Instead, he walked closer and brushed his head gently against her arm. The gesture was both wild and tender, a wordless goodbye. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. She pressed her forehead to his mane. "I'll find you again,"
she promised. "Somewhere out here." After a long pause, he stepped back, gave one last look, and disappeared into the tall grass. The silence he left behind was different this time. Not empty, just full of echoes. Emily sat back in the driver's seat, staring at the horizon. The ache in her chest spread like warmth. She reached for her phone, thinking of calling Daniel. But what would she say? That she'd done the right thing? That she had broken every law she used to enforce? Instead, she opened her camera and took a single photo of the rise. The light spilling across the savanna felt like hope made visible. She drove back slowly, the Land Rover kicking up dust behind her. Every bump in the road seemed to whisper a memory. The time he first purred, the way he had nudged her when she was sad, the sound of his roar shaking the air. Halfway home, she stopped at a ridge where the land stretched endlessly in all directions. It was the kind of view travel companies used in glossy eco-tourism ads, the kind that promised adventure, serenity, and connection with nature. Emily smiled faintly. She understood those words better than anyone now. She sat there for a long while, just listening to the wind. But the world wasn't finished with her yet. By the time she reached her property, there were tire tracks in the dirt road, heavy, official-looking ones. Her chest tightened. She parked the truck and stepped out, scanning the area. The front gate was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. And then she saw them. 2 ranger vehicles parked by the barn. Daniel stood beside them, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Next to him were 2 officers from Wildlife Control, both armed with tranquilizer rifles. Emily froze. "Where is he?" one of the officers demanded. She met Daniel's gaze. "He's gone." "Gone?" "Back where he belongs." The younger officer stepped forward, irritation sharp in his tone. "You released a lion into protected land without authorization? Do you have any idea what kind of liability that is?" Emily's voice was calm, but her hands trembled. "I did what you people never do. I trusted him." Daniel stepped in before the officer could respond. "That's enough," he said quietly. "She's not a threat." The officer glared but backed off. "We'll be filing a report." "Do what you need to do," Daniel replied. When they left, Daniel stayed behind. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, "You really did it, didn't you?" "I had to." He nodded slowly. "They'll come after you for this." "I know." Daniel looked towards the horizon, then back at her. "You think he'll survive out there?" She smiled faintly. "He already has." He sighed, half in admiration, half in frustration. "You're something else, Emily Carter." "Maybe," she said softly. But so was he. That night, the house felt emptier than ever. The porch creaked in the wind, the fields outside bathed in moonlight. Emily sat by the window, watching the shadows move. Somewhere far beyond those hills, a lion walked under the same moon. She imagined him strong and free, his roar echoing through the valleys. She whispered to the darkness, "Be wild. Be safe." And then she smiled. A quiet, broken, beautiful smile, because she realized that this, at last, was peace. As she turned off the light, her old radio played softly in the background, an ad for life insurance, promising protection for what truly matters. Emily let out a breath and whispered, "I already had that."
The night outside answered with the faintest sound carried by the wind, a roar, distant but unmistakable. She closed her eyes. He was out there, alive, and that was enough.
The knock came at sunrise, 3 sharp raps against the door, firm, official, and final. Emily didn't need to open it to know who stood on the other side. The air carried that quiet tension she remembered from her years working in the field, right before something irreversible happened. When she finally turned the knob, 2 uniformed officers were waiting, hats low against the morning glare. Behind them, Daniel stood silently, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, his face a mixture of resignation and sorrow. "Dr. Carter," one officer said, his tone clipped, "we're here on behalf of the Department of Wildlife Management. You're being placed under investigation for unlawful possession and release of a Class A predator within protected territory." Emily's fingers tightened around the doorframe. "Investigation," she repeated quietly, as if tasting the word. "Not arrest." "Not yet," the man replied. "We need your statement first." Daniel met her eyes. "Just cooperate, Emily. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." She almost laughed at that. Harder? It had been hard since the day she found that orphaned cub bleeding at her doorstep, but she stepped aside anyway. "Come in," she said. The officers moved through the house like men cataloging evidence in a crime scene. They took photos, opened cabinets, scanned papers. Every sound, the rustle of folders, the click of a camera, cut into her like a blade. On the kitchen table, they found the empty tranquilizer vials and the old collar. "Was this used recently?" one of them asked. Emily didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were on the porch, where sunlight spilled through the screen. "Yes," she said finally. "It was used to save a life, not end one." The man scribbled in his notepad, "That's not your decision to make." "It used to be," she said softly. When they left, Daniel lingered behind. "You've got a hearing scheduled in 2 days. They're serious about this, Em. You could lose your license, your field credentials, everything." "I already lost what mattered," she replied. He frowned. "You don't regret it." She shook her head. "Not for a second." Daniel sighed. "You never were good at self-preservation." "No," she said, "I was good at compassion. They just don't pay the same." That night, Emily sat on the porch, the same spot where the lion used to lie beside her. The stillness was unbearable. She turned on her old laptop and began typing. A statement, not for the court, but for herself. "If the law sees mercy as a crime, then I'll wear guilt like a medal. I didn't raise a monster. I raised a survivor. He was wild before I found him, and wildness isn't something you can cage without consequence." The words flowed easily, honest and unpolished. When she was done, she uploaded it to her old wildlife blog, a forgotten site she hadn't updated in years. Within hours, the post began circulating. By morning, it had gone viral. Comments poured in from across the country. Finally, someone who understands animals aren't property. She did what any real conservationist should have done. They should be thanking her, not prosecuting her. A few others were less kind, calling her reckless, irresponsible, a danger to the balance of nature. But Emily didn't care about the noise. For the first time, she felt like the truth was out there, roaming free, just like him. The next day, Emily arrived at the Wildlife Management headquarters. The waiting area smelled of coffee and sterile paperwork. The walls were lined with posters about ecotourism, sustainable safaris, and life insurance for outdoor adventurers. The irony wasn't lost on her. When her name was called, she walked into the hearing room. A panel of 3 officials sat behind a long table. Their faces were unreadable. Daniel was there too, seated to one side as a witness. "Dr. Emily Carter," the chairwoman began, You stand accused of violating Section 12B of the Wildlife Conservation Act, harboring and releasing a protected predator within authorized territory. Emily nodded. I understand. Do you deny releasing the animal? No. Then perhaps you'd like to explain your reasoning. She leaned forward, her voice steady. Because captivity would have killed him. Not his body maybe, but his spirit. And if you've ever looked into the eyes of something truly wild, you'd understand that's the greater cruelty. The second official interjected. Dr. Carter, the law exists to protect both humans and animals. You put an apex predator back into populated territory. That's not compassion, that's negligence. She met his gaze. Do you know what negligence looks like, sir? It's ignoring suffering because the paperwork says to. It's letting bureaucracy define morality. The room fell silent. Finally, Daniel spoke up. She's not wrong. She's been doing this work longer than most of us have been alive, and if she says that lion was ready, I believe her. The chairwoman sighed. This isn't about belief, Mr. Hayes. It's about precedent. Emily smiled faintly. Precedent is how the world stays broken. The hearing lasted 2 hours. When it ended, the panel announced they'd deliberate and issue a formal decision within 10 business days. But Emily already knew what the verdict would be. Outside, the air was hot and still. Reporters had gathered by the gate, cameras flashing. Someone shouted, Dr. Carter, do you think you're a hero or a criminal? She stopped, looked straight at the crowd, and said quietly, I'm just someone who opened a door. That night, as she sat at her kitchen table, her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Unknown number, encrypted message. They tracked him. South Ridge, near the old riverbed. He's alive. Her breath caught. She read the message again and again. The world around her faded until there was only that one sentence. He's alive. She went outside, standing under the wide sweep of stars. The night was warm, humming with life. Somewhere out there, the lion moved through the darkness, strong, unseen, free. Emily closed her eyes, letting the wind brush her face. No matter what the hearing decided, she'd already made peace with her choice. Freedom wasn't something granted by laws or licenses. It was earned in the wild, in defiance of fear. And maybe that's what the world needed to remember. Before going back inside, she whispered into the night, Keep going, boy. Don't look back. For a brief second, she thought she heard it again. That deep, distant roar rolling through the hills like a heartbeat carried by the earth itself. She smiled through tears. The reckoning had come, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Because the lion was free, and so was she.
The morning news hit Emily like a storm. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts, missed calls, headlines. Every local channel was covering the same breaking story. Wild lion spotted near Ridge Settlement. Authorities launch search operation. Her breath caught in her throat as she scrolled through the footage. Grainy's cell phone videos showed a shape moving through tall grass, golden fur glinting beneath the sun. Then a roar that sent shivers through her spine. It was him. The orphan she'd raised, the lion she had set free. And now they were calling him a threat. Emily stood by the window, clutching her phone so tightly it hurt. Outside, the world looked calm, the same weathered fence, the same wind pushing through the trees. But her mind was racing. She knew what came next. Once fear entered the equation, mercy disappeared. She grabbed her jacket and keys. Daniel's voice answered on the first ring. Emily, don't do what I think you're about to do. Then you already know I have to. They'll shoot him on sight, Dan. They always do when the public's watching. They won't if he stays away from the villages.
You've seen the way these hunts go. One false step, one scared rancher with a gun. Emily, his tone hardened. You interfere and they'll come after you next. She hesitated, then said quietly, "They already are." Before he could respond, she hung up. Her truck roared to life, tires spinning gravel as she tore down the dirt road. The sky ahead was streaked with red and gold, the kind of sunrise that looked more like a warning than a promise. She drove fast, the wind cutting through the open window, the radio droning about insurance ads and home safety systems, the usual reminders of how terrified people were of losing control. It took her an hour to reach the ridge. She parked behind a cluster of thorn trees, grabbing her binoculars and stepping out. The air was dry, humming with tension. From the hilltop, she could see them, 3 ranger trucks in formation, men with rifles scanning the brush. Their khaki uniforms glinted under the sun. They weren't tracking to relocate, they were moving like predators themselves. Emily's chest tightened. "No," she whispered. Through the binoculars, she spotted movement near the old riverbed, a flash of tawny gold. Her heart leapt. He was there, moving cautiously, ears flicking at every sound. He wasn't hunting, he was hiding. But the rangers were closing in. She slid down the slope, heart pounding. Her boots hit the ground softly, her body moving like muscle memory. Years of fieldwork had taught her how to move unseen. The grass whispered around her legs as she crept closer. The sound of the first shot shattered the stillness. It wasn't a kill shot, tranquilizer dart maybe, but it was enough to send the lion into a panic. He bolted, muscles rippling, tail slicing the air like a whip. Emily froze. Every instinct screamed at her to stay hidden, but she couldn't. She broke cover, waving her arms. "Stop! Don't shoot!" The nearest ranger spun around, startled. "Dr. Carter, what the hell are you doing here? Call them off! He's not attacking anyone!" Another ranger fired. The dart missed, thudding into the dirt inches from the lion's paw. He let out a roar so deep it made the earth tremble. The men raised their rifles again. Emily stepped between them. "If you shoot again," she said low but shaking, "you'll have to hit me first." The lead ranger, Captain Moore, lowered his weapon slightly. "Dr. Carter, this isn't your call. That animal's breached populated territory. Orders are to contain or neutralize." "Contain, not kill. Your own regulations say tranquilization is the last resort before lethal force." He frowned. "You don't understand the pressure we're under. There's media watching, scared locals." "I understand perfectly," she interrupted. "Fear makes people stupid. Don't let it make you a killer." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Daniel appeared, climbing out of the second truck, waving the others to hold. "Stand down," he ordered. "Let me talk to her." The men hesitated, but obeyed. He approached slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "Emily, you can't fix this by throwing yourself in front of a firing squad." "Then help me fix it another way." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're asking me to risk my career. I'm asking you to remember why you started this career." Their eyes met, and something in his expression softened. Finally, he turned toward the team. "Everyone, hold your fire. I'll take point from here." Emily exhaled shakily, then turned to the lion. He stood on the other side of the clearing, watching her, ears forward, muscles taut. He raised her hands slowly, speaking in that calm tone she'd used since he was a cub. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe. Just breathe." He blinked, the tension in his body easing slightly. For a moment, the world held still, just her, the lion, and the low hum of wind moving through dry grass. Then a sound split the air, a gunshot from somewhere behind the line. The lion roared and lunged toward the trees. Emily spun, furious. Who fired? But chaos had already erupted. The men scrambled, shouting, chasing the sound of movement through the brush.
Emily took off after him, ignoring Daniel's yell behind her. Branches whipped her face. The air was thick with dust and adrenaline. She caught glimpses of gold between the trees, flashes of movement too fast to follow. Finally, she stumbled into a clearing. The lion stood there, panting, sides heaving. A tranquilizer dart stuck in his shoulder. His legs trembled. "No!" she whispered, running forward. He swayed, eyes glassy, and collapsed just as she reached him. She dropped to her knees beside his massive body, pressing her ear to his chest. His heart was still beating, slow, heavy, but strong. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "Please." Daniel arrived moments later, gun lowered. "He's sedated. They'll have him transported within an hour." Emily shook her head, tears streaking her face. "They'll lock him up. You know they will." Daniel hesitated, then crouched beside her. "There might be another way." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" He glanced over his shoulder, making sure the others weren't listening. "There's a sanctuary outside state lines, privately funded, independent of the department. If we can get him there before they move in." Her eyes widened. "Daniel, that's illegal," he finished. "Yeah, I'm aware." They stared at each other for a long moment, the weight of what he was suggesting sinking in. Then Emily nodded. "Let's do it." Together they worked quickly. Daniel signaled one of the trucks to secure the perimeter, buying them precious minutes. Emily loaded the lion onto the back of her old Land Rover, covering him with a tarp. The sedative would hold for a few hours at most. When the last ranger turned away, Daniel climbed into the passenger seat. "You drive. I'll handle comms." The engine growled to life, and they pulled away from the ridge. Behind them, sirens echoed faintly, growing smaller as the horizon swallowed the sound. Emily's hands trembled on the steering wheel. "You realize this is the end of both our careers, right?" Daniel gave a wry smile. "Careers come and go. What you did, that's legacy." The sun was dipping low when they reached the edge of the conservation boundary. Ahead stretched miles of open wilderness, untouched and wild. Emily glanced at the lion in the rearview mirror. His chest rose and fell steadily. "Hang in there," she murmured. "We're not done yet." As they disappeared into the orange haze of dusk, Daniel looked out the window and said quietly, "You really do love him, don't you?" "I love what he represents." "And what's that?" "Freedom," she whispered. "The kind that scares people." The road wound endlessly ahead, the sun sinking behind them like the closing of an old life. They didn't know what waited beyond the next ridge, only that they were chasing something bigger than law, bigger than fear, something wild, something true.
The road stretched endlessly through the savannah, a ribbon of dust cutting across the dying light. Emily gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, the roar of the Land Rover blending with the slow, rhythmic breathing of the lion sedated under the tarp behind her. The air smelled of gasoline and sunburned grass, and every bump in the road felt like a countdown. Beside her, Daniel was silent, scanning the horizon through a pair of binoculars. The tension between them was heavy, but it wasn't the kind born of disagreement. It was the kind that comes when both people know there's no turning back. "You're sure this place exists?" Emily asked, finally, her voice dry from the heat. "It's real," Daniel said without looking up. "A privately funded sanctuary on the edge of the escarpment reserve. They take in animals the state deems too dangerous or too wild to release. It's run by someone I used to work with, Dr. Renee Holt." Emily frowned. "Holt? I thought she left the department years ago." "She did. She got tired of the red tape, built her own refuge, funded through donations, grants, and," he gave a dry laugh, "ecotourism packages for people who want to experience nature responsibly." Emily smirked, though her eyes stayed on the road.
Even freedom has a marketing plan now. Daniel sighed. It's not perfect, but it's better than a zoo. If anyone can give him a chance, it's her. They drove for another hour in silence. The landscape shifted gradually from open plains to rocky hills, the grass thinning into hard, sun-baked earth. The temperature dropped as evening fell, the horizon painted with shades of purple and gold. Behind them, the lion stirred faintly. His tail twitched once, then again. Emily glanced at him in the rearview mirror. The sedative's wearing off. Then we're out of time, Daniel said. Up ahead, a metal gate appeared, nearly hidden by brush and shadow. A faded sign read, Holt Wildlife Refuge, authorized access only. Emily slowed the truck, her stomach tightening. We made it. Daniel leaned forward, scanning the fence. Let's hope she's still friendly. They honked twice. Moments later, a tall woman emerged from a small cabin near the gate. Her hair was streaked with gray, her tan skin etched with years of sun and work. She carried herself with the steady confidence of someone who'd seen the best and worst of people. When she saw the vehicle, she stopped mid-step, eyes narrowing. "Daniel Hayes?" she called out. He raised a hand. "Good to see you too, Renee." "Good to see me? You bring government trouble to my door and you think that's good?" "Not government," Emily interjected, stepping out. "Just one lion, one chance." Holt's eyes flicked to her, assessing. "You must be Carter, the infamous lion lady from the hearings." Emily straightened. "I suppose that's me." Holt studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the back of the truck. "Let's see him." They lifted the tarp carefully. The lion lay still but breathing, his mane glowing faintly in the moonlight. Holt's expression softened instantly. She crouched beside him, her hand hovering just above his flank. "My God," she whispered, "he's magnificent." Emily knelt beside her. "He's also hunted, branded, and labeled a threat. I need him somewhere safe before sunrise." Holt stood, her jaw tightening. "Come inside." They followed her through the gate into the compound. It wasn't large, just a handful of enclosures, a few solar lights, and a small building that looked like a cross between a clinic and a workshop. But the air felt alive here, humming with the quiet presence of other rescued animals. A hyena in the distance, the faint snort of an antelope. Inside, Holt poured coffee into 10 cups. "You know what bringing him here means, don't you?" she said. "If the department finds out, I'll lose my permit. You'll lose your freedom." Emily took a sip. "Freedom isn't something they can take. Not really." Holt chuckled softly. "You sound like me 10 years ago." Daniel leaned forward. "Can you keep him here?" Holt hesitated. "Temporarily. He's too big, too recognizable. The press will keep searching. If they connect him to me, this place is done." "Then what?" Emily asked. "There's a migration corridor on the far side of the reserve. It leads into unprotected wilderness. No fences, no patrols. If he makes it through there, he'll be free for good. But it's a long shot." "How long?" 30 miles, maybe 40, through open terrain." Daniel shook his head. "He'll never make it. Not with trackers still sweeping the area." Holt looked at Emily. "Not unless someone guides him." The room went still. Emily set her cup down slowly. "You mean me? You're the only one he trusts." Daniel's voice was sharp. "Absolutely not. She won't survive out there with him unrestrained." Emily looked between them, her decision already made. "He won't survive without me." Holt studied her face, then nodded. "Then you'll need to leave by dawn." Daniel stood up abruptly, pacing. "Emily, think about what you're doing. You're risking your life, your freedom, for an animal that the world has already given up on."
Emily turned toward him, her voice quiet but fierce. "That's exactly why I'm doing it." He stared at her, torn between admiration and fear. Finally, he exhaled and handed her his field knife. "You're impossible. I prefer relentless." Holt prepared a pack: dried meat, a compass, medical supplies, and a small GPS beacon. "If you make it to the corridor, send a ping. I'll cover your tracks." Outside, the wind had shifted, carrying the scent of rain. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, echoing across the plains. The air felt heavy with something inevitable. Holt opened the pen gate. The lion stirred weakly, eyes blinking open as Emily approached. She crouched beside him, her hand resting on his mane. "Hey," she whispered, "we're not done yet." He blinked slowly, recognition flickering in his gaze. Daniel helped her secure a tracking harness around his chest. "You'll have a few hours before he's fully alert. Use them." Emily nodded. "I will." As the first drops of rain began to fall, Holt squeezed her shoulder. "You've got courage, Carter, but remember, out there, the wild doesn't play favorites." Emily gave a small smile. "Neither do I." They set off just before dawn, the Land Rover crawling across the muddy path until the sanctuary disappeared behind them. The lion lay in the back, half awake, his golden eyes reflecting the faint light of morning. Daniel's voice came through the radio one last time. "Emily, when you find freedom, don't forget where it started." She pressed the transmitter. "I won't." The static swallowed his reply. As the rain thickened, turning the earth to red clay, Emily glanced in the mirror one last time. The sanctuary was gone. Only open wilderness remained. She looked at the lion, then at the vast horizon stretching before her. "All right," she whispered. "Let's find your forever." The road narrowed into nothing but grass and mud, but she kept driving, the Land Rover carving a path into the unknown. Behind her, thunder cracked again. A warning or a promise, she couldn't tell. But ahead, through the curtain of rain, freedom waited. And this time, she wasn't running from anything. She was running towards it.
The rain came harder than Emily expected. Thick, relentless sheets that blurred the horizon into a gray wall. The windshield wipers worked furiously, but visibility was nearly gone. The Land Rover skidded over the soaked clay, tires sliding in deep grooves carved by the floodwater. "Hold on," she murmured, gripping the wheel tightly. Behind her, the lion shifted restlessly, his claws scraping faintly against the metal floor. He was awake now, disoriented but alert, golden eyes reflecting the lightning that cracked across the sky. The savannah, once open and golden, had turned into a battlefield of mud and thunder. The storm wasn't just a backdrop, it was a test. Emily knew they were running out of time. The sanctuary lay miles behind, and the migration corridor was still more than 20 miles ahead. If the weather didn't stop her, the trackers would. She knew the department well. They'd have helicopters, GPS drones, and tranquilizer teams sweeping the reserve by morning. Her fingers brushed over the small GPS beacon Holt had given her. It blinked green, a sign they were still on course. She thought briefly of Daniel, wondering if he was watching the signal from his office, wondering if guilt had driven him to help her or love had. A sharp flash of lightning illuminated the road ahead. No, not a road anymore, just open ground. The truck lurched violently as the tires hit a rut. The lion let out a low growl, his instincts on edge. Emily steadied the wheel, whispering, "It's okay, boy, we're almost there." But even as she said it, the engine coughed. Once, twice, then died completely. "Damn it!" she hissed, slamming her hand against the steering wheel. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the hiss of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. She stepped out into the downpour, mud sucking at her boots. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She lifted the hood and stared at the smoking engine. Water had flooded the air intake. The truck wasn't going anywhere. Behind her, the lion moved. He stood up slowly, his mane slicked flat by the rain, his massive frame silhouetted by lightning. He looked powerful, wild. For the first time since she'd found him, he looked like he belonged to the world again. Emily smiled sadly. "Looks like we walked from here." She slung the backpack over her shoulder, grabbed the tranquilizer kit, and started down the hill. The lion followed her, his gait steady, almost protective. They moved together through the storm, two silhouettes against a world that seemed intent on erasing them. Each step was harder than the last. The mud clung to her legs, the cold gnawed through her jacket, and every gust of wind threatened to throw her off balance. But she didn't stop, because somewhere ahead, beyond the flooded plains, lay freedom for both of them. Hours passed, or maybe it was only one. The storm made time meaningless. The lightning painted everything in flashes, trees bending under the wind, the lion's golden fur shimmering in bursts of silver light, and the endless stretch of wilderness that felt more like an ocean than land. Then through the curtain of rain, Emily saw movement, headlights. Her heart froze. She dropped to her knees, motioning for the lion to stay low. The beam of light swept across the plains, cutting through the storm. A helicopter. Her pulse pounded. The department's tracker team. They must have intercepted the signal from Holt's beacon. "Damn," she whispered. She turned off the GPS device immediately, stuffing it deep into the mud. The light passed overhead again, slower this time. She waited. 1 minute. 2. Then she heard it. The distant hum of engines, trucks. They were close. The lion shifted beside her, growling softly. Emily placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Not yet," she whispered. "We can't run until they pass." But the wind shifted again, and the rain carried her scent downwind. The lion's ears twitched. He sensed it before she did. The change in the air, the faint metallic tang of engines, the human voices. "Sector 4 clear. Wait, movement ahead." Spotlights cut through the darkness, pinning them in a blinding cone of light. "Target located," a voice shouted through a loudspeaker. Emily's blood turned cold. "Run!" she screamed. The lion bolted, muscles coiling like springs as he tore across the flooded plain. Emily followed, mud splashing up to her knees. Bullets didn't come, but darts did, hissing through the rain, embedding into the ground inches away from her. "Hold on," I heard Daniel's voice shouting from somewhere behind the chaos. "She's with him." But no one was listening anymore. Fear had taken over. The lion stumbled once. One of the tranquilizer darts had grazed his flank. He shook it off and kept running, but Emily saw the change. His strides were slower, heavier. "Come on," she gasped. "Don't stop now." The terrain rose sharply ahead, a rocky ridge slick with rain. She scrambled upwards, gripping roots and stones, pulling herself higher. The lion climbed beside her, his claws finding impossible purchase on the wet rock. Halfway up, lightning split the sky, revealing a valley beyond, lush, untouched, stretching endlessly. The migration corridor. They were almost there. But below, engines roared closer. Spotlight swept upward, finding them on the ridge. "Emily!" Daniel's voice echoed through the storm. "Stop! You'll get yourself killed!" But she didn't stop. The lion turned his head once, glancing back toward the lights. For a brief moment, their eyes met, human and wild, bound by something deeper than language. And then, with a final burst of strength, He leapt. The ground beneath him gave way, slick with rain, but he landed on the far side of the ridge, tumbling into the valley below. Emily reached the edge and looked down. He was alive, but barely moving. "Hang on!" she shouted. Daniel appeared behind her, breathless, soaked. "You can't go down there, it's too steep." "I have to." He grabbed her arm. "Emily, please, you've done enough." She pulled free. "Not yet." Without another word, she climbed down the slope, slipping, sliding, her palms bleeding from the rock. The rain blurred everything, but she didn't care. When she reached him, she fell to her knees beside his massive body. His eyes flickered open, dazed but alive. "You're okay," she whispered, pressing a trembling hand to his chest. "You're okay, boy." Above them, Daniel shouted something. She couldn't hear the words, but then she saw it. The Rangers at the ridge's edge, their guns raised. "Don't shoot!" she screamed. "He's down! He's not a threat!" But the wind stole her words. One of the rifles fired, a dart this time, but the impact hit her arm. Pain flared through her body as the tranquilizer spread like fire. Her vision blurred, the world spinning. She leaned against the lion, her voice faint. "We made it, didn't we?" He lifted his head slightly, pressing his muzzle against her shoulder, as if to say yes. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was the flash of lightning illuminating the valley below. Green, open, wild. The place she'd been chasing all along. And then, silence. When Daniel reached her minutes later, he found her unconscious but breathing. The lion was gone, his paw prints leading deeper into the valley, toward the wilderness that stretched beyond the government's maps. Daniel looked out at the open land and smiled faintly. "She did it," he whispered. "She really did it." As the storm eased and dawn broke through the clouds, the sound of a distant roar echoed across the valley. A roar that carried not fear, but triumph. And somewhere between thunder and sunrise, the wild claimed back what was always its own.
The world returned to Emily slowly, like dawn breaking through fog. At first, there was only the hum of distant voices and the faint beeping of a monitor. Then, warmth, too artificial to be sunlight, and the sterile scent of antiseptic. Her eyelids fluttered open. The ceiling above her was white, the kind found only in hospitals or government facilities. For a long moment, she didn't move. Every muscle in her body felt like it had been carved from stone. Her arm throbbed where the dart had hit. Then, memory came crashing back. The storm, the chase, the lion's fall, his breath against her shoulder. She tried to sit up, but the world spun. A hand pressed gently on her shoulder. "Easy," a familiar voice said. "You've been out for nearly 2 days." Emily blinked until the blur sharpened into Daniel's face. He looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot, jaw rough with stubble, but relief softened his features. "Where?" she croaked. "Field hospital, temporary base. They pulled you out just before the flood hit the ridge." Her gaze darted around the small room. Medical equipment, 2 guards outside the glass door, a tray of supplies. No sign of her belongings. Her pulse quickened. "The lion!" Daniel hesitated. "Gone." Her breath caught. "Gone? How?" "By the time we reached you, his tracks led into the valley. The team followed for miles, but the trail vanished near the ravine." Her chest tightened. "So he made it?" Daniel looked down. "Maybe, or maybe he didn't." She met his eyes. "You don't believe that?" He sighed. "No, I think he's out there. But the department? They'll never stop looking," she finished for him. He nodded grimly. They've already issued a containment order. They want him alive for now, but you know how that goes. Emily swung her legs over the side of the bed, wincing. Then I need to leave. Emily! Don't, she said quietly. If he's still out there, he'll come looking for me. Daniel exhaled slowly. You realize how insane that sounds. You think a wild lion? He's not just any lion, she interrupted. He knows my scent, my voice. He's looking for me. Daniel stared at her, and for a moment he didn't argue, because deep down he knew she might be right. A knock on the door broke the silence. A tall man in a dark uniform stepped in. Captain Moore, the same officer who'd led the hunt. His expression was unreadable. "Dr. Carter," he said, "glad to see you awake." Emily stiffened. "Captain," he crossed his arms, "you've caused quite the mess. Unauthorized transport of a Class A predator, interference with government operations, and a media circus that hasn't stopped since your name hit the reports. I saved a life," she said evenly. Moore smiled thinly. "That's not how the board sees it." Daniel stepped forward. "She's still recovering. You can debrief her later." He ignored him. "You're suspended from field work pending investigation. You'll remain here until we decide what to do with you." Emily met his gaze. "You mean until you find him?" He didn't answer, but the flicker in his eyes said enough. When he left, Daniel turned to her. "He's not bluffing. They're using you as bait." "I know. So what's the plan?" Emily smiled faintly. "You're assuming I have one." He leaned closer. "Do you?" She nodded towards the small window. "How far's the ravine from here?" Daniel frowned. "About 6 miles west." "Why?" Her eyes burned with quiet determination. "Because if I can make it there, I can find him before they do." Daniel rubbed his face. "You're insane." "Maybe," she said, standing slowly, "but you're going to help me anyway." He gave a resigned laugh. "You always drag me into trouble." "Only the good kind," she replied. That night, while the guards rotated shifts, Daniel slipped into her room with a duffel bag and a stolen keycard. She changed into field gear, plain clothes, boots, and a hooded jacket. The tranquilizer scar on her arm ached, but she ignored it. "Security cameras?" she whispered. "Looped for 5 minutes. After that, you're on your own." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "Emily, when you find him, what then?" She hesitated. "Then I let him decide what comes next." Daniel nodded. "Go." She slipped through the corridor, moving silently past the hum of computers and the muted buzz of radios. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. She started towards the west, under the faint light of a half-moon. Every step felt heavier, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what she was leaving behind. Her career, her safety, her life as she knew it. But ahead lay something more important: redemption. As she crossed the open field, she caught sight of something in the mud. Paw prints, large, deep, unmistakable. Her breath hitched. "You're close," she whispered. She followed the trail into the forest, branches brushing her face, the scent of damp leaves filling the air. The prints led her to a stream, then veered towards higher ground. And then she saw it. A flash of gold between the trees. She froze. Slowly she stepped forward, her heart pounding. The lion stood at the edge of the clearing, watching her. His mane glistened with dew, his eyes calm but sharp. "Hey," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You found me." He took one slow step forward, then another. Emily didn't move. The distance between them closed until he was only a few feet away. She could hear his breathing,
steady and strong. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. The lion blinked once, then bowed his head slightly, a gesture that was neither submission nor dominance, but recognition. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You're free now. You don't have to come back." He let out a low rumble, deep and resonant, then turned his gaze towards the mountains beyond the forest, the wilderness, his true home. She nodded, understanding. She said, "Go on. It's your world now." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, with a final glance at her, he turned and walked away, each step deliberate, powerful, certain. Emily stood there long after he disappeared into the trees. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. When she finally turned back towards the valley, she saw Daniel standing a few yards away, his face unreadable. "You found him," he said quietly. "I didn't. He found himself." Daniel looked at the horizon, where the first light of dawn was breaking. "What will you do now?" Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe start over, somewhere quieter, maybe teach." He chuckled. "You'd never last in a classroom." "Maybe not," she admitted, "but I'll try." They started walking back towards the compound together. Behind them, the forest was alive again. The sound of birds returning after the storm, the rustle of wind through wet leaves, the faint echo of a roar that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. As they reached the ridge, Emily paused, looking back one final time. Somewhere out there, the lion was running free, his story no longer bound by walls or laws. And for the first time in years, Emily felt free too. The wind carried the scent of rain and wild grass. She closed her eyes, breathing it in. Freedom didn't come from breaking rules or winning battles. It came from letting go of fear, of guilt, of cages we built for ourselves. When she opened her eyes, the horizon burned gold with the promise of a new day. "Let's go home," she said softly. And together, they walked into the sunrise.
The sun rose slowly over the plains, spilling gold across the horizon like paint over canvas. The storm was gone now, its memory etched only in the damp scent of earth and the glistening drops clinging to every blade of grass. Emily stood at the ridge's edge, her hair moving softly in the morning breeze, her heart beating in rhythm with the land that had nearly taken her life and given it back. It had been 3 weeks since that morning in the valley. 3 weeks since she watched the lion vanish into the wilderness, free and unbound. In that time, the world beyond had moved on, as it always did. News reports had shifted to other stories, the runaway lion incident fading from the headlines like yesterday's storm. But for Emily, nothing had faded. Every dawn she returned to this ridge overlooking the valley, watching and waiting. Not for him to come back, but to feel his presence again, in the wind, in the rustle of the tall grass, in the quiet strength of nature reclaiming what was always its own. Her days were quieter now. She had resigned from the department officially. No more politics, no more cages disguised as conservation. She spent her mornings writing, her afternoons walking the land with local rangers, teaching them about humane coexistence, sustainable wildlife care, and ethical tourism. And at night, she recorded her thoughts into an old handheld camera, her way of keeping a record for those who might someday understand that saving nature wasn't about control, but about respect. That morning, as she adjusted the focus on her lens, she spoke softly. "People always think freedom is something you fight for," she said, her voice steady but tender. "But sometimes, it's what you give away. Sometimes it means setting something, or someone, free, even when it hurts."
She paused, looking toward the valley where the mist curled like smoke. The lion didn't belong to me. He never did. I just happened to be in his story long enough to remember what it means to live wild and unafraid. She smiled faintly, lowering the camera. The door of the cabin creaked behind her. Daniel stepped out, holding 2 mugs of coffee. His hair had grown longer, and there were new lines around his eyes, but his presence felt grounding. "You're up early again," he said, handing her a cup. "Couldn't sleep." "Still waiting for him?" Emily shook her head. "No, just listening." Daniel sipped his coffee. "You know, the rangers found new tracks last week, near the western ridge. Large ones, fresh." Emily's eyes lit up. "A lion?" He nodded. "They say it's him. But this time, he wasn't alone. Smaller prints beside his. Maybe a female, maybe cubs." Emily's chest tightened, not with sorrow, but with something deeper. A quiet joy that reached the corners of her soul. "He made it," she whispered. "He built a life." Daniel smiled. "Seems like you both did." She laughed softly. "Maybe." They stood together for a while, drinking in the silence of the morning. The world around them was alive, birds calling, insects humming, the faint whisper of wind through the trees. After a moment, Daniel said, "You ever think about writing a book about all this?" Emily glanced at him. "What would I even call it?" He shrugged. "Maybe The Heart of the Wild? Or The Lion Who Came Home?" She smiled. "Or maybe just Freedom. Short and true." Daniel nodded. "I like that." They walked down the hill together, heading toward the sanctuary that Holt had since reopened with their help. It had grown, new enclosures built not as cages, but as open habitats, more like stepping stones for rehabilitation. Visitors came now, not just to look, but to learn, to understand that the wild wasn't something to conquer, but to coexist with. Holt greeted them near the main gate, her weathered face bright with pride. "Morning, you two. We've got a new arrival. Injured leopard, snare wound on the leg. Poor thing's terrified." Emily exchanged a glance with Daniel. "Let me see him." They followed Holt to the infirmary. Inside, under soft lighting, a young leopard lay on a padded mat, breathing shallowly. His spotted coat was dulled by dust and fear. Emily knelt beside him, speaking gently. "Hey there. You're safe now." The animal's eyes flickered open, wild, uncertain, but curious. She could almost see the reflection of another time, another creature in that gaze. "He reminds you of him, doesn't he?" Holt said quietly. Emily nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Every single one does." Holt placed a hand on her shoulder. "The world needs people like you, Emily. People who don't just save animals, but listen to them." Emily smiled, her eyes still on the leopard. "No one really saves the wild. We just remember to stay out of its way." For the next few hours, she worked with quiet focus, cleaning the wound, setting the splint, whispering softly whenever the leopard stirred. She moved with the ease of someone who had long stopped seeing fear as a barrier. Later, as dusk settled, she stepped outside, washing her hands at the basin. The sky was painted in deep oranges and blues, the kind of sunset that made even silence feel sacred. In the distance, across the plains, a roar rolled through the air, low, powerful, and unmistakable. Emily froze, her heart leaping. It wasn't near, but it was there, real, alive. Daniel stepped out beside her. "You hear that?" She nodded slowly. "He's telling the world he made it." They stood there together, watching as the stars began to rise one by one. The roar came again, softer now, carried by the wind like a promise. And in that moment, Emily understood something profound. That freedom wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. Years later, long after she'd retired and the sanctuary had grown into a renowned conservation center funded through ethical tourism and wildlife education grants, people still spoke of the lion. Children visiting would ask, "Is it true? The lion who escaped? The one who came every dawn?" And the guides would smile and nod, "Yes, it's true. He came to her door every morning until the day she let him in." Emily never corrected them. Some stories didn't need facts. They needed faith. Every morning until her last, she would still rise before dawn, sit by the window with her coffee, and look toward the valley. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she swore she could still hear it, the echo of paws on dry earth, the faint, distant roar of a king reborn. Her lips would curve into a smile, soft and knowing. Because in the end, freedom wasn't about letting go. It was about remembering the wildness that lives in all of us and choosing every day not to cage it.
He came to her door every dawn, and when she finally let him in, she didn't just save him, she saved herself.